Over the course of all these rundowns, we've seen many different objective types. Item collection quest, reactor startups, reactor shutdowns, uplink terminals, clearing a path to extraction, generator clusters, and the list just continues to go on. And these level objectives aren't always the same from level to level. Sometimes they're fairly simple and don't take all that long to complete. Other times, though, they can be quite complex and take prisoners hours to finally accomplish. But of all the objectives the Warden has ever given to us, today's just might be the simplest of them all. Survive. Hello everyone, Professor Scaly here, and welcome to the alternate R5B4 level guide. As always, we're starting off with your loadout, and this time around we have a bit of a crazy one to bring in with us. And that would be a biotracker, 2 mine deployers, and a sea foam launcher. Yes, you heard that correctly, 2 mine deployers. Now, the reason why I recommend this crazy loadout is that we are dealing with a Warden survival protocol mission, which means we're going to be running around a lot from area to area, dealing with these sleeping enemies, looking for resources to resupply with them, while also dealing with hordes of enemies that are going to be spawning in every so often. These waves of enemies getting bigger and bigger the further we go into the level. And I find that the easiest way to deal with all of this is just using the good old mine seafoam door trick. When a wave of enemies spawns in, use a biotracker to figure out what direction they spawn from and what route they're taking to get to you, and then quickly run over to a nearby door, shut it, mine it, maybe reinforce it with a little bit of seafoam so more of the enemies pile up on it, and then once the door breaks open, that mine will kill most if not every single one of the enemies, which means you can conserve your ammunition and your HP for later moments in the level where you won't be able to utilize mines quite as effectively. Now, the reason why I like to bring 2 mine deployers with me and not just simply 1 is because I also like to split up quite a bit. There's a lot of ground you could cover in this level, and the more ground you cover, the more resources you can collect. And the more resources you collect, the higher your chances of survival. The thing is though, if you only bring 1 mine deployer with you and you try to split up, there's a good chance that a wave of enemies is going to spawn in and go after the group of people who don't have a mine deployer with them. Which means that instead of using just a single mine to deal with pretty much all those enemies and conserve the rest of the resources, they're going to have to shoot a lot, waste ammunition, and potentially even lose a fair amount of HP if they get hit left and right. If you really want to though, you definitely could change one of the mine deployers for maybe a sentry, or you could actually get rid of the seafoam launcher for a sentry if you really want to. I'm just honestly not the biggest fan of bringing sentries into this level as I want to stay mobile. I want to constantly be going into areas, grabbing resources, resupplying, and dealing with these enemies, and if I bring sentries with me, I feel like I'm just holding my ground way too often, and I'm not grabbing nearly as many resources as I could if I just did the whole mine seafoam trick, which is the main reason I like it so much for this level. Dropping down into level, you'll see that your main objective is to find a way to stay alive throughout the Warden survival protocol, just like I mentioned earlier. And because this is a bit of a different objective type, we're going to go about this guide just a little bit differently. We're still going to talk about every single one of the zones one by one and everything you need to know from start to finish, but first we're going to be actually going over the survival protocol itself and certain timestamps and special events that are going to be occurring, and just give you a brief overview of what this entire level will entail. So, starting off, once you drop down to the level, a 2-minute timer will appear at the top of your screen. This indicates how much time you have until the survival protocol itself actually initiates. Once that timer hits 0 though, it will be replaced with a 30-minute timer, and this is going to indicate how long you have until you can actually get to the final security door, open it up, and get to your extraction point. There are a few security doors though along the way which will be locked until certain time intervals, so the entirety of the level is not open to you for these 30 minutes. It will sort of be in 3 different phases, although I guess technically 4, but we'll get to that in just a few moments here. So starting off with phase 1 out of 3, this is going to last from the 30-minute timer to the 25-minute mark, and throughout this period you're going to have to deal with 10 enemies spawning in every minute. Then once we hit that 25-minute mark, we move into phase 1.5 out of 3. During this phase, from the 25-minute mark to the 20-minute mark, you now have to deal with 12 enemies every single minute. Yeah, honestly, I don't know why there's a phase 1.5 when it just simply adds 2 extra enemies per the wave, but hey, it is what it is. Once we hit the 20-minute mark though, we will then move into phase 2 out of 3, and this will go from 20 minutes all the way down to 10 minutes. When phase 2 out of 3 initiates, a specific security door, which we'll mention later, will unlock. It will be able to actually go into there, and well, we actually sort of have to because the infectious fog is also going to rise up, which will almost completely cover all the previous areas we were in. This is sort of done in a way to make it that once we can move it to the next area, we are forced into moving there, and we don't just simply stay in the first area until we completely deplete all those resource packs. So phase 2 out of 3, we're going to be in a new area dealing with some new stuff, and throughout this period, we're going to have to worry about 20 enemies spawning in every 2 minutes. Then when we make it all the way down to the 10-minute mark, we are then going to be moving into phase 3 out of 3, and this will last all the way until that timer hits 0. Same thing as before, a new security door is going to unlock and the infectious fog is going to rise up even more, forcing us into that new area. And while we're in this area, we now have to worry about 25 regular enemies spawning in roughly every 2.5 minutes. And this is going to go all the way until the timer hits 0 and even a little bit further beyond it. So we'll have to deal with this as well a little bit while we're on that extraction scan. And for the most part, that is a brief overview of the entire Warden survival protocol. Or at least that's what I would like to say, but there's a lot of special events that occur along the way. It's not just simply those 3 different phases. So there are going to be a few special waves that spawn in from start to finish at certain times. The first one we'll go over would be the giant waves. There are going to be a few moments where a wave of a ton of giant strikers and or giant shooters will be spawning in, and these occur specifically at the 26-minute mark, the 21-minute mark, and the 11-minute mark. And the further we get into it, so moving from one phase to the next, the more enemies are going to be spawning in with each of these giant waves. I believe the 26 and 21-minute mark, you only have to worry about 3 or 4 giants spawning in, but I believe that 11-minute mark giant wave actually spawns in about 6 or even 7 of them. Then there's also going to be the hybrid waves, which are going to be spawning in at the 1 minute and 40-second mark, as well as the 0 minute and 0-second mark. I believe these 2 waves will spawn in about 3 or 4 hybrids in total. Then there are the snatcher waves. Don't worry, these are not going to be spawning in a bunch of snatchers, just simply one along with a regular wave of enemies. These are going to occur at the 20-minute mark and the 10-minute mark. So basically, when you're transitioning from phase 1 to phase 2 and phase 2 to phase 3, not only are you going to have to deal with a lot of enemies all at once, but you're also going to have a snatcher in the mix that will come after you. And then last but not least, we have the blackouts that will occur. Yeah, you thought having to deal with all these enemies was bad enough? Well, at certain time intervals, the lights are going to go out and you'll be covered in pitch black darkness. There are only 2 blackouts in the entire level though. One will occur at the 26-minute and 50-second mark and will last until the 26 minutes and 20-second mark, so 30 seconds of blackout. But the other one is going to initiate at the 6-minute and 40-second mark and go all the way to the 3-minute and 40-second mark, which means you will be covered in pitch black darkness for 3 whole minutes. And this is right towards the end of the level where you have to worry about those waves of 25 enemies spawning in. And now that you have a brief overview of the entirety of the survival protocol, let's talk about every single one of the zones one by one. So starting off inside zone 178, not really a whole lot of stuff to this area. There are a few enemies you could deal with, a few resources you could collect, but you also could just simply blitzkrieg your way right through the zone and get to the back end to the security door to zone 179, this door just having a full team scan tied to it, and head into there. Zone 179 itself is basically a central hub room. In here, there will be a fair amount of resources to collect, no enemies you have to worry about whatsoever, and there will also be a fog turbine, which I would recommend you find and bring with you, as there are a few different locations throughout the entirety of this level that will have infectious fog in them. Inside the zone, there's also going to be 3 different security doors, one to the west, one to the east, and one to the north. And the one to the north is the one that's currently under lockdown until the timer ticks all the way down to the 20-minute mark. And at this point, it's all about survival. So you can either all 4 stick together as a team and head into either zone 180 or 181, or if you want to, you could do it the 2 full team scans and then split into 2 teams of 2, each going into their own separate zone, and you just look around. There'll be enemies inside these areas, there'll be a lot of resources to collect, there'll be a little bit of infectious fog in some of the areas, so Turbine can help you out a little bit here and there, and there will also be 1 power cell in both of these side zones. And while you do not need these in order to complete the level, I would highly recommend you grab at least 1 of these, because later in the level, your 2 side zones you could go into for resources are both going to be locked and require power cells to be plugged into nearby generators in order to unlock them. And while you don't need both of those zones unlocked to get all the resources you need to survive, you definitely want to at least unlock 1 of them. Otherwise, it's going to be a little bit difficult once you get into phase 2. So however you and your teammates want to do it, just go throughout here. You basically got 10 minutes to explore these 3 different zones, looking around for resources, deal with enemies, utilize doors, mines, and C-foam as often as you can. When it does come to the waves of a lot of giant enemies spawning in, you might just want to simply rely on your guns. And yeah, you're just going around and doing your best to survive. Once you get closer to that 20-minute timer though, you're going to want to take that fog turbine and 1 or both of the power cells with you and go back to that security door to zone 182 and get ready to hold out there for a little bit. because once that timer ticks all the way down to the 20-minute mark, that security door will unlock, you can do the full team scan tied to it, and you want to open it as quickly as you can. Because not only is the infectious fog now rising up, which is sort of forcing you out of this area, but a wave of about 20 enemies is spawning in, as well as a snatcher. And while you could hold your ground out here and deal with all those enemies, you could also just simply open up that security door to 182 and go to the left of you where there is immediately a door that you can just open up, shut behind you, mine it and seafoam it, and let that deal with a lot of the enemies for you. If you want to add in a little bit of a bonus, go on ahead and shoot while you're in the first room of 182 to alert any of the enemies in there. That way they also come after you and they blow up on that door as well. Either way though, once you dealt with all those immediate enemies and that snatcher, you can then quickly go back, grab the fog turbine and one or both of your power cells, and push further into zone 182. In here, there will be a few different rooms, there'll be some more resources to collect, some enemies to deal with, and at the back end of it, you'll be able to find another central hub room. In here, there's going to be 3 more security doors and 2 generators in the southeast corner, one up above and one down below in the infectious fog. Now, these 2 generators are tied to the 2 security doors, the one to the west and the one to the east. So if you want to head into those optional areas, you need to plug a power cell into those generators to unlock those security doors. And at this point, you're basically just doing the same thing that you did before. You have a northern security door, which will be under lockdown until the timer ticks all the way down to the 10-minute mark, and you got 2 different side zones that you could potentially go into. So you can either all 4 go into one as a team, or you can split up into 2 teams of 2. Personally, I like to just simply have everybody go into the same zone, as I find there are plenty of doors and resources in just one of these 2 side zones that you don't really have to go into both of them to have a decent chance of survival. The other thing too is these zones are a little bit less forgiving as they are covered in pitch black darkness. There's a lot more infectious fog in them, there are spitters everywhere as well as a few regular enemies here and there, but thankfully there are a lot of resources. So once you've unlocked one or both of the security doors, just go into one of the 2 zones, however you feel like doing it, doing your best to survive. And then once the timer gets closer to the 10-minute mark, you're going to want to come back onto the central hub room with that fog turbine and go to the northern end of it to the security door to zone 185. And just like before, once that timer ticks all the way down to the 10-minute mark, that security door will unlock and you'll be moving on into phase 3. You could do the full team scan that's tied to the door, and then 1 or 2 different things. If there's a lot of enemies in the first room of 185, I would actually recommend you don't open up the door right away, but instead deal with all the enemies coming at you from behind as well as the snatcher. Then once they're all dead, you could go into zone 185. If there's not much in there though, by all means open up that door and quickly get in there so you have a little bit more wiggle room to deal with all those enemies, as you have a wave of about 25 enemies coming after you as well as that snatcher. As for zone 185 itself, it's pretty much the same thing as before. There's going to be more enemies for you to deal with in here, more resources to collect. There will be some infectious fog here and there, so fog turbine will help out quite a bit. And there's actually a disinfect station you can use to get rid of all of your infection towards the back end of it. As for this zone though, there's not really a whole lot of doors in here you can utilize, and you don't really want to use these for dealing with the survival protocol enemies at all. Because at the back end of the zone is a security door to 186, and that security door has a class 3 sustain alarm tied to it. And as you can see with this map overlay, there are 2 different locations that enemies could possibly spawn from, and all 3 of the doors that are located inside this zone can be utilized for this alarm. Which is why once I get into the zone and I deal with that initial wave of enemies and that snatcher, I will either run around, grab resources and whatnot, or if I'm looking pretty good, I would just simply make my way through. I will shut all 3 of those doors and then mine and seafoam the one that leads directly into my room and just activate the alarm and get to work on it right away. Then once the alarm has been taken care of, I will take a little bit more time to go throughout the entirety of the zone, grabbing resources and clearing out any of the enemies who are not quite dead yet. And then if there is a door still somewhere in here that I can utilize, I will stay near that area and utilize that door for the next wave. Then once that has been taken care of, I will go into zone 186. Again, this is a bit of a situational thing, so just adapt on the fly. Once you're done with everything inside of here though, and you've taken care of that class 3 sustain alarm, you could go into zone 186. In here, same thing as before, more enemies to deal with, more resources to collect, a few more doors you can utilize, and of course there's going to be even more infectious fog, although a lot of it you could pretty easily avoid. And at the back end of the zone, you'll be able to find the security door to zone 187, which will automatically open up once that timer goes all the way down to 0 minutes and 0 seconds left. Now, when that timer hits 0 and that security door to zone 187 automatically opens up, You could all 4 rush into there as a team and get on that extraction scan, or if you want to, you could be a little bit patient and actually deal with the initial wave of enemies that spawned in, as there's going to be about 25 regular strikers, shooters, and 3 or 4 hybrids coming after you, and then once they are dead, you can go and get on that extraction scan. Because that scan, while it does take a little while, as long as you deal with this initial wave of enemies, you don't really have to worry about any other enemies actually making it to you before you get out to the level. And yes, you could just deal with them on the extraction scan, but that room is wide open, not really any cover whatsoever, so dealing with all those enemies at once, seeing how you have no nearby doors you could shut mine or sea foam, can be a little bit awkward. This is another situational thing. It really just depends on the team I'm going in with, but sometimes I will stay outside and deal with all of those enemies from a distance before they get close to me, and then I'll fall back in and get on the scan once I've taken care of most of them. Or if I can trust my teammates and I know that we can handle it, I'll just hop on extraction and just deal with the enemies there. Either way though, once you get that scan all the way to 100%, you are done and you have completed alternate R5B4. And that's all there is to it. Alternate R5B4 was the first iteration of the Warden Survival Protocol objective, which we would later see more of in Rundown 6 and 7. The concept of being locked in a level, running around and looking for resources while fighting for your life against hordes of enemies, all while waiting for that timer to slowly tick down until you're finally allowed to progress closer to extraction, is, in my opinion, an amazing idea. Even though this version is not really the best one out there, because I cannot lie, if you know what you're doing, this level does have a lot of downtime in it, and it isn't all that stressful. I suppose this is just another great example to add to the list of first-time level concepts that were greatly expanded upon in future rundowns. As always though, thank you for watching this video all the way to the very end. I do hope that it was able to provide you with some assistance in beating this level. If you have any tips or tricks for this level that you want to share, any questions for me, or you just have something in general that you would like to say, please do let me know down in the comments. Hit that like button if you enjoyed the video, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more from me, and if you want to join my lovely community, there's a link to my Discord down in the description, as well as some other links you might be interested in. Among those links being one to the official GTFO merch store, which, as always, I highly recommend you check out if you're a fellow GTFO enthusiast and you're looking to pick up some sweet merch. Until next time, start planning stuff out with your squad, as alternate Rundown 6 will be arriving on September 14th, and hopefully, I'll see all you wonderful people in the next video.